Hi, welcome to City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski. Mike, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Walt. Yeah, welcome to the set.
Yes. Well, let's get started, and I want to talk to you about something that's a topic that's on everybody's mind these days and has been for about the last
Spring?
6 weeks. Well, spring, I think, is next, but it's snow, snow, snow. And I know that it's been a record-breaking year this year. But maybe you can explain to our viewers how the city works operationally with regard to these snow accumulations, both before, during, and after the event. If you could kind of go through that for our viewers.
Well, first, it's interesting because I gave my State of the City address a couple weeks ago, and I know we'll be touching on that. But I was tempted to stand at the microphone and just say snow and sit down. It was... It really has been overwhelming the last month. And I want to lead by thanking people. You can't get anything done without a whole lot of cooperation. And, our Department of Public Services does a tremendous job. They do so year-round with all the functions that they're responsible for. And it's really all hands on deck when the snow comes. But even at that, we don't have enough employees, we don't have enough equipment to do it all on our own. And over time, our DPS leadership, Commissioner Mike Collins and his team, have developed a great network of private contracted plowers, to be part of the team. And so whether it's our staff or whether it's our contracted guys, they do a tremendous job. So they've been great. The community's been great. I know people are really getting tired of the snow and the more snow and the fact that once it's on the ground, it's hard to move. So people have been incredibly helpful. The people who have shoveled out hydrants, the people who have shoveled out storm drains, the people who have helped neighbors, people who have had great suggestions, even people who have had complaints have done it for the most part in a productive and respectful way. And we're really trying to get to everything. It's a challenge.
Now let me ask you this. I think our viewers would be interested to know, obviously in the budget that is put together for the city, you have a line item for snow removal or whatever comes along with that. So let's say that now you've got double that line item or triple. Where does that money come from? What's the process of paying for those costs?
So I want to answer your first question, but I'll answer the second one first, and then we'll go back to, because I didn't really answer the operational question. But on the budget, we budgeted $800,000 and some change, and we've gone well beyond that. There are a couple of things that are at play with snow and ice budgets. The state, once you set a number as your snow and ice budget, you can't retreat from it the following year. You're locked into putting at least that much in every year after. So you don't want to set it too high, and then if it shows to be too high, you're stuck with it in there every year and having to go through extra steps to revert it out and put it elsewhere. But probably more important, it is the line item in a municipal budget that the state allows us to carry over into the following year and, in other words, carry debt from that line item and fund it out of the following year's budget. Other than that, you can't. You need to balance your budget at the end of every fiscal year. Mm-hmm. It's different with snow and ice because you just don't know when you set it. Yeah. You don't know what the need will be. So we have that option at the end of the year. Also, if there's a significant enough storm event, then the federal government will declare it a state of emergency and will reimburse. It's not enough for the governor to declare a state of emergency. The federal government has to do it as well. So we know that we'll be getting reimbursements on the blizzard. I think that was January 26th to 28th.
28th, right. We
know we'll get reimbursements on that storm, and it looks like they'll be in the order of $300,000 to $400,000. That's what we're trying to, and it's about gathering all our invoices and being able to log all that you did during that time. So our hope is to get reimbursement in about that amount. We're working with the Mass Municipal Agency, MMA, who represents cities and towns. We're working with them to advocate with our federal government and federal representatives to try to get one or more of the other storms designated so that we can get reimbursements there as well. I can tell you that we've spent just about $2.3 million to date, which leaves us about $1.5 million over. We know, as I said, we'll get reimbursements, hopefully up to about $400,000 on the blizzard. We're hoping to get reimbursements on one or more of the other storms. And then when we see what the overall shortfall is, we'll make a determination. Do we have reserves at the end of this fiscal year to pay some or all of it before June 30th? Do we carry some over to next year? But that's an annual equation
Sure.
that a municipality needs to do when we get the kind of winter that we're having now.
Right. And I think in most years it's not really visible because we don't have these kinds of winters, but this year has been quite different.
And I will also say operationally, we've tried to respond to concerns about width of streets, ability to get emergency vehicles down those streets, needs for salting, need for plowing. And, for example, the storm we had just a day ago, some of the side streets didn't get plowed. It was about 1.5 inches of snow. And with the cost that would have been involved in calling all the troops in and going, there was a decision made to get the main streets clear and let the melt take care. And there's been some melt, a bit's refrozen, and there'll be more melt in the next couple of days as the temperatures go up. That's just an example of a decision you have to make. We also have been salting as much as possible, but there was a point during the height of all this snow where the State Department of Transportation cornered the market on salt, and cities and towns were not able to get their trucks filled at the handful of salt plants around the state. So that's been a challenge. We had significant salt reserves. They're gone. We've been getting salt every opportunity we have, but we still have a very small pile. And we started for the first time in years cutting that salt with dirt. People would have noticed that recently. So, that will give us some extra cleanup to do in the spring so that doesn't get caught in our catch basins. But these are the type of things that have been kind of extraordinary this winter.
Well, thank you for that insight, Mike. Now, you mentioned earlier your State of the City address, and BevCam, of course, taped it as we do every year. And I have to say, there's a lot happening in Beverly and a lot happening in your administration. Maybe you can touch on, for our viewers, some of the initiatives that you're working on currently, not talking about the major infrastructure projects, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, there are actually two big initiatives that I'm excited about putting out there and trying to do something about. And one is the drug challenge that every community faces. And I spoke about it in my State of the City, that the reality is that drug and alcohol abuse and addiction is in every high school in this world. Not just this city, state, country, this world. It's there. It's real. It's societal. And there also is drug and alcohol addiction and abuse in every neighborhood in this world. And there probably is not a family that if they look, an individual, that they look closely enough, whether it's within their family, within their circle of friends, their neighbors, everybody knows the face of addiction. Yep. And addiction robs us of some incredibly bright and talented and wonderful, beautiful people. And so that's something that I think it's been allowed to be, it's been stigmatized over time. And that's kept communities from really addressing it the way it needs to be addressed. The reality is that addiction is an illness and it's a disease, and it needs to be treated as such so that we can talk about it without that stigma. The only way to understand it and attack it is to be able to talk about it. So what we've done is we're working with the District Attorney John Blodgett, and his office, and we're going to roll out as much educational opportunity as we can this year for prevention. At the same time, we're looking at the capacity for treatment locally and in our region and seeing whether we can help to augment that. And then there's the enforcement piece. There are people who deal these drugs, who bring them into our community, who make them readily available at cheap cost to people who are desperate. And somebody gets addicted to drugs, they're desperate. And so we want to attack the dealers and get them off our streets, get the drugs off our streets, get the dealers in jail, get as high up on that food chain as we can, and make a difference. But as I said, right now we're leading off with some educational opportunities. Next week, March 10th, there's a program that was already in the works that the school nurses had put together for parents to recognize opiate use, and the signs of it, and try to prevent it. We'll be doing a show next month, that you'll be helping us do with the district attorney, with our police chief, to help the public better understand right through BevCam what's out there. And then in May, we'll be doing an evening forum for middle school and high school students and their parents, again, educationally. And so that's the kickoff. It's not a set schedule. It's not a year on drugs. It's a commitment that we need to make day in and day out. And I said the other night, as long as I'm mayor, it's going to be one of my top priorities because it's just too costly to communities and it's not right. We need to do something better to fight back. So that's one. The other piece, the other initiative that I'm very excited about is our summer learning initiative. We have a number of kids in every grade who are truly at risk for summer learning loss, which is what happens when kids don't get enough opportunity and enough intellectual stimulation during the summer break, so that they actually lose on their reading levels and other things, other subject matter. We also know that kids are supposed to learn to read. The focus of the early years in school are to develop literacy skills. Teach kids to read, and by the time they enter third grade, they're supposed to be ready to use those literacy skills to learn. So it's up to third grade, learn to read. Starting in third grade, read to learn.
Yeah.
So our goal is to make sure that all of our children in our public schools are ready to use their reading skills to learn by the time they enter third grade. We're starting modestly. We're offering this summer to 60 kids who are incoming first graders, they're kindergartners now, a chance to be part of this 3-hour every morning literacy academic program, followed by the summer school lunch program and an afternoon that's a traditional summer camp model. So they'll have a full day. And our lead partner in this effort is the YMCA, the Beverly Y, Greater Beverly Y. And we've got other significant contributors in the community, both for-profit and non-profit, who are going to help underwrite the cost of this effort. Now, we're starting with 60 kids. Our hope is that we'll show success with pre and post testing, and by next summer we'll be able to offer those same kids as they go into second grade the same opportunity, and we'll be able to take a group of incoming first graders next year and do the same. Ideally, within a few years, we'll be offering it to every at-risk student going into first, second, and third grade who we identify and whose family agrees to the program. And eventually we hope to be able to offer to anybody who wants it. At that point, there'll probably need to be a tuition component, but right now we're trying to offer it as needed to this identified at-risk population of kids. If we're successful, it will make those kids better ready to learn and give them a real strong foundation to have success lifelong. It will also make it so teachers will be able to hit the ground running every September with their whole class and not have to address the remediation needs of kids who fall back during the summer, which will help every kid in the class. And it'll strengthen our whole school district, which will strengthen our whole community.
And I know, Mike, from previous programs on BevCam a number of years ago, this is something that you've been very involved with as one of the founders, I think, of the Beverly Educational Roundtable, and you were involved in a lot of initiatives there. So I'm glad to see that you're continuing along that.
Thanks.
And I would like to say, going back to the opiate addiction, and that just to clarify for our viewers, we will be taping the nurse's presentation on opiate addiction from the auditorium in the high school, and I believe the Blodgett and Chief Lasher will be your guests here on this show in about a month.
Right, and the hope is that you'll be able to show that during the month of April, which will help lead into our evening forum May 6th.
Right. And
as I said, these aren't just doing a couple of events and being done. This is really a starting point to trying to make inroads and keep, it's not just kids who are at risk, but certainly teens and adolescents are very much at risk. And so we're starting there. Now,
last time, Mike, you mentioned that you were working on a conservation restriction to preserve an area around Norwood Pond. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How is that going?
Yes, actually very timely and very exciting, because it's much more of a process than I understood a year ago when we started working on it. But the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs needs to approve conservation restrictions. So we reached out to Essex County Greenbelt. We said, we have this property. It's about 140 acres. About 85 of it is land and the rest is Norwood's Pond. And so that's the sum total of the 140 acres that we're putting into this restriction. It's currently zoned as open space, but a future mayor and city council could reverse that zoning. And we don't want there to be any uncertainty around that. As we look to fully develop the appropriately zoned commercial and industrial spaces along Dunham Road and along Otis Road on the other side of the highway.
Right.
We want to make sure that what's open space stays open space permanently, so that there will always be that buffer for the North Beverly neighborhoods, and there will always be that wildlife corridor and open space area. So we've finished the process of negotiating with Essex County Greenbelt and getting EOEA to sign off, and we're ready to bring it to the City Council. Very excited about that, and we'll present it to the City Council at their next meeting on March 16th.
Wonderful.
Now, they need to approve it, and as I said, we've been working on it a while, so we've been keeping the council briefed on. And what it'll do is Essex County Greenbelt will hold the restriction. We'll continue to own the property and to take care of the basic maintenance of the property. And some of the terms in the restriction that we needed to make sure we work through to make sure that we continue to have the opportunity to maintain the trails and to maintain the dam at Norwood Pond and to have the potential opportunity for some floodwater storage in the future on parts of that property to prevent flooding downstream in some neighborhoods. So
Great.
Some of the things that factor in.
Wonderful. Now, let me ask you this. There are some major significant infrastructure projects, and I'm going to ask you to kind of bring us up to date on the Brimble Avenue Connector Road, the Route 1A Rantoul reconstruction project, and the new middle school. So let's start from the top and kind of bring us up to date on the Brimble Avenue Connector Road project.
Sure. So as you know, we spent the whole of 2014 in a race, really. The state told us, we're not comfortable with the earlier plan. We want you to build the road in place, and it's April now, and you need to have it fully designed from zero by October. So we pushed and pushed, and we got it done. And so we got the final commitment of the $5 million in grant funding from the state in December. It took longer than anybody had thought, but we got it in. And we were able to go out to bid with the job. We are in the process of awarding the bid to a general contractor, and the plan is that they'll break ground in the spring with a goal of completing the whole project in 1 year, one construction season. And the project is coming off exit 19 north at Sawyer Road, building a new connector road up to the Victoria Rocky Post at Brimble Ave with a roundabout at each end. And then a length of Brimble Ave to the overpass and down to Herrick Street Extension, and a length of Sawyer Road essentially from the highway off-ramp up towards Northridge and Soccer, et cetera, up by there.
And I know that as we stand right here, the planning board still has not made a decision regarding the zoning waiver for the developer there on that
Separate issue.
Yeah,
Private property owner who wants to build, we all know about it.
Yeah.
Private property owner wants to build a retail plaza that would include a Whole Foods in the same vicinity.
Right.
So I understand why they're always tied together. And the planning board is scheduled to vote on that special permit application, whether to grant the special permit to proceed with a retail development or not, at their March 17th planning board meeting.
Right, okay. All right, the Route 1A, the Rantoul Road reconstruction project, which is quite a long stretch of highway.
The whole of Rantoul Street and then Cabot from Gloucester Crossing up to Memorial.
To Memorial, yeah.
We are working with the state to make sure that they put bid documents out by early March so that they can award a bid in April. They need to go through their April board meeting to approve awarding the bid and give a notice to proceed by May so we can break ground in May. Now that's the goal. The goal is to break ground by the end of May so that they're fully working by summer. And that's been the goal, and we keep pushing on it. Mass DOT has been understandably distracted by the MBTA challenges, and we keep trying to be heard through that noise so that they don't fall behind on our work. And so we're keeping on with that. We're going to try to get it done.
Now, let me ask you this. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are kind of wondering, with the scope of that project, how much dislocation in terms of traveling down Rantoul Street and so forth and rerouting traffic,
I'll give you an example. The Brimble Ave project is a $5 million project. This Rantoul Street 1A project is $20.6 million. So in scale, it's different. We did a lot of work over the last year. By we, I mean the city with some water and sewer line work, as well as National Grid with a lot of utility work in the street in Rantoul. So there already was kind of a first phase of it all. We learned some things from that. There was some upset for businesses and residents. We're working very hard to try to ensure that with this larger project, that we coordinate and time things so that it doesn't disrupt, any more than is the minimum we can make it. And it's also going to be a fairly long project in terms of time. It's going to be at least 2, maybe 2.5 construction seasons, but it's such a long length that different sections of it will see it at different times. And there'll be long stretches of time where somebody at the lower end of Rantoul doesn't see it at all, whereas somebody closer up to Gloucester Crossing does. So we'll be working with the general contractor as soon as Mass DOT hires that person.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the new middle school. Tell us about that. How is that going?
Fantastic. Now, we met last week with the subcommittee at Mass School Building Authority. We're going before their board in late March to get approval to go into what they call schematic design. We have put before them a request that our preferred schematic be to build at Memorial and to build a new school.
Right.
And they're going to hopefully approve that at their March board meeting later this month. We've been moving on a timeline very aggressively. Over the next several months, the costs will get nailed down. There's been some talk about the cost being higher than people had originally thought. And at our local school building committee meeting next Tuesday night, we'll have a presentation that explains where things were and where things are. And the reality is that to build a middle school for 4 grades, you need a certain amount of square footage. The projections for the building construction cost, which are still 1.5 to 2 years out, are coming in pretty high. We've gotten some assurances that that number can be squeezed down. We also are working with other communities that are in similar places in their projects and the Treasurer's Office and the School Building Authority staff to try to help them to better kind of balance their reimbursement rate to the real costs that we're seeing. And so the expectation is that we'll be able to build the school that our kids need and our community needs without it breaking the bank. We'll make sure, I'll say this, we're going to build the best school we possibly can build for our kids, and we're going to build a school that we can afford to pay for at the same time. And that's our real challenge in the coming months as we work to design the school, is to at the same time make sure that it's a school that fits our budget and fits the state's budget.
Right. So those, if I may call it that, those are kind of the big 3 that are going on now. And I think a 4th one where we don't have quite yet a plan or a direction in which we want to go, and that is the waterfront. And last month it was announced that the coastal zone management had made a draft decision to remove the designated port area designation. Now, with that, there's going to be some zoning considerations. So what efforts are being made with regard at the city level with regard to the waterfront rezoning?
So as you remember, we started the process of requesting to have our designated port area de-designated last spring. We followed on that pretty quickly by starting a public process around rezoning the waterfront, recognizing that if we got what we asked for from the state, and while they haven't made their draft decision final, there's nothing in the air that suggests that they'll do anything different than a full de-designation, and so we're hopeful. So we wanted to make sure that we were moving a rezoning effort forward on the same track. And we now have a draft waterfront zoning ordinance amendment ready to go before the City Council. We're putting the final touches on it, and we hope to put it before them at their March 16th meeting as well. That involved a lot of public process, meetings with different, we'd say, stakeholders, people who own property in the waterfront, people who utilize the waterfront regularly, neighbors to the waterfront, and we got a lot of great input. I think there are a handful of concerns that we have listened to and tried to incorporate into the language of the proposed zoning ordinance, and we think that we have put language forward that the council can get behind and support and embrace. So we're hopeful that'll go well this spring, and the City Council will agree and approve the new zoning ordinance, so that once that draft decision becomes final, the new rules are in place, and we'll see what can happen down there.
Now, let me ask you this: what limitations do you think that this new zoning will place on future development? Or maybe I can ask it a different way: Are you going to ensure that any kind of rezoning won't restrict you like the previous designation had?
Well, I'll say this: one of the values was to make sure that every use that goes on down in the waterfront today can still go on once the new rules are in place. So that's first. And I know that our commercial fishermen, for the most part lobstermen, have been concerned about that. And I'm very sensitive to that concern, and we're working hard to make sure that the language and in fact the practice in the future makes sure that those uses are always protected. So what we're really just trying to do is add some new uses that haven't been possible due largely to the DPA. So the new uses that we're looking at are really mixed-use development or redevelopment on the waterfront, with first floor commercial and retail and second and third floor residential being a possibility. Along those lines, concerns about building height, we've expressed a commitment to keep the building heights essentially the same as are currently allowed, with a 5-foot allowance for eaves that aren't occupied, so that you can have structures that will hold up to weather and time.
Mm-hmm. Now let me ask you this. I want to circle back to something you had mentioned before. Well, what has been your experience now with the public process associated with looking at this? I know that you've made a big attempt to make it transparent and invite the public in. What's been the administration's reaction to the kind of response you've gotten from the public getting comment on these types of things?
Well, I'd say just in general, it's not just on the waterfront, it's on any issue. People want to be part of shaping the future of our own community, and people have great ideas. And when people have concerns that they raise, those concerns are really always worth listening to and looking to see whether they can be addressed. As long as people understand that, that their elected officials, city staff, volunteers will, in good faith, try to take in everything that's offered and come to outcomes that are in the best interest, in the best public interest, both locally to immediate abutters and also to the city as a whole. And to try to strike that balance doesn't leave everybody satisfied in every instance, but you try to be respectful,
Sure.
You try to give thought and try to find ways to address valid concerns and to incorporate, thoughtful ideas, and then you reach a point where you have to make decisions and move forward, and you do.
Yeah.
And as I said, sometimes you can come to a decision that everybody's happy with, and other times, some people might not like the final decision. And I hope in those instances they at least respect the process
yeah.
and that they were listened to, and that it was heartfelt and genuine, the attempt to listen and to incorporate, which, as I said, aren't always able to be successful.
Yeah.
But you want to try to come out of it with quality decisions and thoughtful decisions that really move forward the concerns and the best interests of the whole community in every case.
Yeah. Well said, Mike, I have to say. Now, we only have about a minute or two left, Mike. Is there any parting words you want to make to our viewers here at the end of the show?
Did you leave out any questions, or have you?
No, I think we covered all the questions.
Okay, I'd say this. Please stay involved. We always need volunteers for city boards and commissions. When we're usually we're always reaching out on that front. We need good people to be involved. As winter turns to spring, please stay in contact with me, with my office, with my chief of staff Kevin, and my secretary Martha, as you see needs in your neighborhood and around the community. And again, thank you for just how much people have chipped in and helped during a very tough winter.
Well, Mike, thank you very much.
Thanks, Walt.
And I'd like to tell our viewers that you have been watching City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski, and we'll see you next time.